Welcome to the channel Tribe. In this session of virtual meetup, we are having Monika Sharma discussing on what is your test strategy pattern.
Welcome everyone to this 15th virtual meetup with Monica and Kalpana. Monica is senior consultant at ThoughtWorks, who will speak on test strategy, while Kalpana is a test consultant at Rapid Circle. She'll speak on low-code automation tools. Before I move forward, huge shout out to our annual sponsor, BrowserStack. They are our exclusive sponsor for all our community events and premier sponsor for all our conferences. Without further ado, I would like to welcome now Monika Sharma. Monika Sharma is a senior consultant at ThoughtWorks. I'm super thankful to her for taking time out on a Saturday morning where she has to navigate through a production release, through a already ongoing session, and still taking time out to deliver a session to all of you, to all of us in that matter, for that matter, to increase our knowledge. Let me just welcome Monica on stage. Hi, Monica,
Hi.
you're on stage.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much, Ashutosh. It's always been great to be a part of Test Drive and share everything, whatever I have experienced while working in different projects within ThoughtWorks. So without further ado, I'll just start sharing my screen. Give me a moment. Okay, so I'll start with the test strategy pattern. This is our today's topic, and with this topic, we are not just going to discuss what is test pyramid, and we are going to cover few more topics going forward. And now, before jumping into what test strategy is and then what are the different patterns, I am going to explain why we exactly going to need this. Okay, so test strategy pattern helps us organize the testing by grouping different testing levels, which I'm going to show you in the further slides. This basically provides visual representation of number of tests which are going to be covered at different testing level. Okay, so I have taken a very first use case of test pyramid because it's very common in general, and I think every one of you might be knowing about this in one or the other way. So yeah, so I've taken a brief use case around it, and the use case revolves around the chatbot. Okay, so here is my simplest uh, diagram or the architecture diagram where I have the chatbot as a component, dialog flow, and Google Cloud Function. So I'll give a rough idea, maybe a three or four liners around how my architecture looks like and then how the data is flowing. So first of all, the mobile from chatbot, chatbot is there in the mobile and it sends a request to dialogflow with correct parameters, and then after the dialogflow it goes to the request goes to the Google Cloud Functions, and the Google Cloud Function receives a post request from Dialogflow and returns the appropriate response based on the parameters, different custom parameters which we have sent. Then Dialogflow responds the request to the chatbot. That's it. Okay. Now there are two terms which I'm going to use here, is that context and the intent. Okay, so before jumping into the setting up quality gates, so the context defines the conversation flow and the next step. For example, let's take a live example, real life example, which is Swiggy chatbot. Okay, so here in the Swiggy chatbot, we used to our first question is, where is my order? Okay, so then the chatbot replies, this is the time at on which you have ordered, and this is the place, and then after that it takes this much of time, right? So it basically a conversation, a context flow. Okay, and the intent is basically, let's say chatbot doesn't know that what to reply, so the default intent would be that, sorry, I couldn't understand your request, please rephrase a bit, or let's say, can you send your question again? Okay, so now coming to setting up a quality gate. While preparing a test strategy, we always tend to answer all the WH questions, that what we are going to do it, how we are going to do it, and why we are doing it. Okay. So our step one will always be identify the goal of testing, irrespective of whether it's a mobile app, and then let's say we have a web app, and then microservices to serve the API calls, right? So irrespective of whatever the pieces are, we first have to identify what we are going to achieve with testing. Okay. Which is in this case is validate input output, basically request and response, validating context, basically a conversation flow, and validate the bot response on the UI. On the UI specifically, how bot is responding, and how we can see the response from UI specification, and validating the usability, whether, let's say, if I reply, instead of where is my order, I reply order where, you never know how the end customer will ask the question, right? In what format, or in what sentence. So that comes under the usability. Okay. So identifying the goals of testing is very important, because it gives you a vision that what testing level, or what um, type of testing you are going to include. Next, we have map the goals with the testing levels and type. It basically means that, let's say my goal is validating input output, or validating context. Uh, for an instance, then how I'm going to test it, that is, I'm going to test via API test, or the let's say not super test. Super test is another JS library. Then let's say rest assured. So under which testing umbrella it comes, whether it's API testing, or let's say whether it's a UI test. For example, the bot response on the UI, how I'm going to how I'm going to test it. If it's a web app, then it can be a UI test. If it's say in the mobile, then we can add it as a part of mobile test. Okay. But again, it comes under the UI testing only. Okay. And validate the usability, it again comes under the UI test. So when we have identified that what all testing type we'll be needing, or whatever types of testing we are going to do, the third step is to consider the cross functional requirement. Let's say cross functional requirements, they are majorly revolves around the security testing, performance testing, usability testing, which we usually tend to miss, because we think that, okay, we our whole responsibility is to do a functional testing, which is just around how it looks in UI. And let's say if we are doing service test, microservices testing, like from postman, what request time we are sending, and what response we'll be getting. So we tend to miss all these three layers. Okay. There are certain organization where I agree that the roles are fixed. For example, the test automation person has to do just test automation, and then they have a performance tester separately. But we can still sit together and then see what kind of coverage we can build in case of performance test, what are the functional testing scenarios. Okay. Because at the end, at the performance test level also, we have to send the injections in the form of scenarios. Okay. So the scenarios will not be always constant. Okay. So now the step 4 is picture the overall strategy. So first we have identified the step of set objectives of testing in the left. In between, we have seen that defining what to test at every level. And step 3 is cross-functional testing. So in this kind of ecosystem, or in this kind of scenario, we have opted for test pyramid. The reason is that we want to cover the majority of the test, or the majority test coverage within at the unit level. After that, at the service level, we wanted to check the integration, basically with the API test. And at the top, we have the UI test, which is comparatively minimal in nature. And with UI test, we are going to just cover the end-to-end scenarios, the very brief, basically a user journey. For example, I have opened the app, I have opened the chatbot, I mentioned where is my order, and then The chatbot replied with, you place this order at this time at from this place, it will take this much of time, this is the ETA. And then you move away from this chatbot app from Swiggy. Another scenario, another end-to-end scenario is that you open the chatbot from Swiggy, and then you mention that I want a refund because the quality is not good. They'll ask you to select the items, and then they'll start the refund after a certain set of conversation. So these are considered as the end-to-end scenario. Those scenarios will be covered as a part of UI test. So the test pyramid structure is just like again, it's a triangular pyramid where the majority of the chunk will be covered at the unit test, then service, basically the integration test and the UI test. Now there is a misconception that at the service test we can only cover the API test, okay, which is not so. At the service level or at the integration test level, we can add the API test, which are basically REST or GraphQL in nature. Second one is the Kafka related test, because we are in that, with that also we are going to check the integration. There are certain places where they include the infrastructure test also, because with infrastructure test we usually check the integration. Okay, so it's just not API test, it's a combination of different tests, or maybe one or two tests as per the ecosystem of client or a project that you have currently. Okay, so again, okay, so the third step is the cross functional testing, which includes the usability, performance and security. And this is the overall, or this is the basically a full fledged test strategy which is technical in nature. Okay, now we have we have again this misconception that once we have decided with the test strategy, that is fixed. So ideally, the test strategy should evolve as and when we add a component. For example, let's say if a chatbot supports AI/ML, or there are certain models introduced in that. So ideally, my test strategy should not just be testing the integration test or end-to-end test, or let's say exploratory or the UI test. It should also include contract test and other tests around model bias, let's say model related UI, AIML model related test. Okay. So the crux of this is that it should evolve as and when we make changes or we introduce new components in the architecture. Okay. And the sixth step is that don't assume and raise questions. So, for example, what will be the response if bot is down? Do we have any rollback process? Do you have any garbage text handling process? Okay. So, again, don't have a trust on what you see. Our literally job is to always raise questions with respect to why this is happening, and to find a breaking point within that. Okay, so we always have this mindset of why this is going let's say this much of smooth. Is there any issue that we can actually find with let's say in this app, or within our test strategy also, is there anything else which we are missing, and maybe there can be a issue while deploying in prod. Okay, so we always have a sharp eye with respect to uh, any gap or any failures. Okay, so we have seen till now is that how we should approach with the test strategy, and within this use case we have seen how we can use how we have used the test pyramid. So now we are going to discuss about test trophy. So test trophy is based on idea that all the levels of testing are important and should have the almost equal number of tests. It basically means that we should be focusing on like integration and the end-to-end test, like as the way we focus on the unit test. Okay, So it also this so basically this approach is great for great fit for the teams to prioritize end-to-end testing and smaller code base. So basically, let's say if you are working with a smaller team which is developing an app which is basically a very UI heavy app, and then there is a minimal backend. Maybe you are using a GraphQL service to request most of the details from app, and then you are getting the response from there. And so in that case, the code base is comparatively simpler. Above that, your integration test consists of maybe a few GraphQL APIs, but the end customer is focused on how the UI or the end-to-end flow is looking. For example, more towards I have majority of the UI flow. For example, let's take an example of Big Basket or Swiggy. So in Swiggy, we have the food app, we have the food section, we have the Instamart section, we have other section within the Instamart. There is a gourmet section, okay, to order uh, fruits, vegetables. There are so many sections are there. Okay, let's say they have the GraphQL API calls, which basically fetches all the info in one go. Okay, then but as an end user, I am going to see all these sections like fruit, vegetables, Instamart, food section, and dine or maybe order food section. Okay, so there are multiple sections. So in that case, the kind of test cases or the test scenarios which I'm going to cover as an end-to-end test or the UI test is going to be comparatively more in number than, let's say, at the integration at the unit level test. And here the focus of using the test trophy is that we tend to ignore the static code analysis while development. So this shows that, okay, with the unit test, integration test, and end-to-end test, we should also focus on the static testing layer, also static code analysis layer, where we are catching most of the unit level flaws, which is like typos, or there can be a functional error also in the code. Okay, so that all these things will be caught with the static code analysis. Now we have the third one, and the last one is that test diamond use case, which is, as usual, I mean, as we have seen, it's in the diamond shape, which is tilted square. Okay, so it focus on unit and integration test equally. So the purpose of using test diamond is that we are going to add the unit test at the and the integration test in equal number, and we are going to focus in adding both. Like, um, for example, let's say we have a use case where I'm going to add the unit test, and in the real life, there is a lot of integration going on. Integration with AWS, integration with GraphQL, integration with REST calls, and integration with Kafka also. Then in that case, the integration test won't be less in number as comparative to the unit test, because we are checking a lot of integration pieces. Okay, so with this strategy, we are going to visualize that unit test and integration test are kind of equal in number. Okay, and the top and the below ones, the smaller sections, will be either having a UI test or the static code analysis in the normal project. But in one of the scenario which I have faced is that I had to add the infrastructure test as well. So again, the infrastructure test can be added at the integration level, but let's say you have a repo. I mean, the project has a repo, and that project has a parallel deployment repo as well. So that deployment repo will be having the infrastructure test written by the DevOps and the developer. Okay, so that will be covered as a part of infrastructure test, which I have written below. And in the top, I have mentioned the performance test and the snowflake test. So with Snowflake test, I'm going to check the connectivity, as in that what data is coming in and out from Snowflake, and again the performance as well. So there is no hard and fast rule where it is mentioned that we have to take, or we have to put the cross functional testing like separately and the functional testing separately. There can be a possibility that we can give a equal importance to, let's say, cross functional test as much as we give to functional test. So in my case, the kind of architecture I have, or the kind of client ecosystem I have, in that case it was very important to do performance test, or to run the performance test, let's say once in a month, or with every major release which is happening like once or twice in a month. Okay, so we can always club together, because at the end this particular the motive of using this test strategy pattern is to give the visualization. Okay, now on the right side, just for demo purpose, I have added the tools and libraries which I am using for testing. For example, for infrastructure test I am using TerraTest. The second layer, unit test and integration test, we have written for integration test we have written those tests in rest assured, and spring boot is an application, application. And then performance test we are using locust, and for snowflake test we are utilizing dpt as a testing library. Okay, so uh, again the structure of test diamond will remain the same, but the kind of testing which you are going to do at every level. For example, there can be a possibility that performance test won't be there for your kind of scenario, right? So it's always these tests are going to be customized as per what ecosystem we have. Okay, now we have discussed on different types of test strategy patterns, and little bit around tech, which is written little bit around technical in nature. Okay, but what else does test strategy should include? Okay, number one is test bed, which all environments I'm going to have, and whether in these environments I'm going to see the data, and which environment I'm going to use for what kind of testing. Okay, so this is the maximum kind of environments I can have for testing, which is from dev we have to promote to QA, and then from QA to UAT to system test to prod, and prod to CIT. So there are certain projects where the code is getting promoted from dev to QA to prod. Okay, or QA to UAT and UAT to prod. So what test bed we have? After that, what is the CI/CD process? How we are promoting our code base? For example, from dev you are promoting to QA. In QA we are testing it. We are acknowledging it that we can sign off all the features that have been developed. Okay, and then it will move. We are going to promote it to UAT for in order to see that whether the code is stable, and then again testing it there, a rough round of testing, and then finally moving it to production. Okay, so what can be our CI/CD process? Next is at the end, there was always have been a discussion that for test while doing the test automation, that okay, you have added the test, for example at the integration test layer, or let's say you have added these many service test, or these many Kafka test. Okay, so in that case, if someone asks me that how you are evaluating it, how, I mean, what are the facts and figures through which you can say that okay, this much of work is done, this much of effort is done, or what are I mean, how you are going to evaluate that how many critical bugs have came in this month. Okay, so these facts and figures kind of thing is going to get covered as a part of KPI. So there are many ways to capture these metrics, and there are many metrics related to, let's say, bugs, test execution, test planning, and then test creation, test automation creation. Okay, so there are many KPIs around it. It just you have to find a right fit where you think that your stakeholders would be interested in, or your leads would be interested in, to see, okay, that what you have done as a part of, let's say, pulse update for the current week. Okay, or for the current month, if you are reporting monthly or reporting weekly, that depends on that. Okay, so uh, so there are many KPIs or many metrics which we can report, but I have taken three because I feel that these are more relatable. First one is percentage of critical bugs reported, which is equals to critical bug count divided by total bugs. Second one is percentage of test execution equals to total test created divided by test planned. Then bug cap, reopened bug count divided by bug fix count. So this bug cap is comparatively more important than the above two ones. The reason is why. So the reason is that, let's say there is a bug, developer has fixed the bug, you have tested it, and then after that we have closed it. Okay, then it came again, the same bug came again, so we have reopened that particular issue, the bug issue, and then again the developer has worked on it, and then it got closed again. So there must be any gap which has happened in the first time, whether in development or in testing, that it came again the next time. Okay, so for for analysis of, number one, it's a wastage of effort also, and it's very important that what we are missing, because if we correct it at the first time, this won't happen, this is not going to happen at the later stage, and we tend not to miss the important bug, and there can be possibility that that bug will get transferred to production. Okay, so I feel that comparative to two, the third one is very important from the QA front or from the testing front. Okay, likewise, there are multiple KPIs, you can have a read around it. And there can also be a possibility that you might not be using a KPI or a matrix as such in your project for reporting. It just, I think that it would be a good to cover KPI also as a part of this. So, till now, we have seen what test pyramid is, how test trophy looks like, and what test diamond also looks like. But what are the differences? How we are going to evaluate that which test strategy pattern I'm going to use at what stage or at what kind of ecosystem? So, in that case, test pyramid is a very, very basic test strategy pattern which covers most of the ecosystem or most of the architecture. Okay, let's say you will be having majorly X type of architecture, so that will be covered as a test pyramid where we have a unit test at the base level, then integration test, and a very minimal end-to-end test or the UI test. But test trophy will come into the picture where you have a less code base, and you can see that the developers are going to write less unit test, and then the integration test and the UI test, they are going to be side by side, like you are going to give the equal importance for integration and the UI test. Or maybe the test trophy is used when the architecture or the ecosystem is UI heavy specifically. And the test diamond, with the test diamond, you will give the equal importance to unit and the integration test. Let's say this comes into the picture when at the integration level you have again you have a service test, basically a REST calls and then GraphQL calls to test. Kafka integration you have to test, and then maybe AWS integration also you have to test. Okay, and there is also a saying that test trophy and test diamond, they are kind of anti pattern of test pyramid. But again, every test strategy which you opt for, test strategy pattern which you opt for, is um, is always very customizable with respect to the architecture you have. Okay, and then we start creating test strategy or test strategy pattern in the very beginning, right from inception and till the end. It should evolve, it should not be fixed. So you have a keen eye with respect to what dev stack looks like, what all components are getting added, and whether we are covering those components, those component testing or the integration between the multiple components, whether we are covering the testing part of that within our test strategy or not, or whether the existing level of testing is covering those integration or not. Okay, so I have a question for you. I can't see the chats right now, but I wanted to know from you that which point is not covered in what else does test strategy contains. Okay, for example, I have covered test strategy pattern. I have covered test bed. I have covered CI/CD pipeline, and then I have covered one more point. Okay, so I wanted to know from you that what is not covered exactly. I can't see the chat. Ashutosh, can you tell me like what we are getting in reply?
I think people are still replying to it. I think
Okay.
Karthik said you haven't covered in scope and out scope.
Okay. Yeah. Right.
Gadi A is saying you haven't covered shift left approach.
Mm-hmm.
Is saying it should also include NFR cross browser devices.
Okay.
Let's wait for some more responses.
Yeah. So I have covered. Um.
Schedule is somebody saying Parul is saying test schedule should also be included.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if there are more people tuning in. Test environment risk strategy. I think that's a good point. Dimpy is saying
Yeah.
risk
Correct.
strategies mentioned. Yeah, risk strategies to be mentioned. Impact assessment. Muthu is saying
Hmm. Right.
uh, a
And read
risk.
model.
Yeah, Sandeep is saying risk, comma system over component. Entry
Mm-hmm.
and exit criterias. Test resource. Yeah, these are some of the options answers which are coming in. Kalpana.
Right. So I think you have covered now most of the points. So test strategy should also contain, apart from those points, should also contain what will be the agile process looks like. Okay. And second is that what will be the defect life cycle. That was the end 2 point which were missing. Apart from that, you have covered most of the points. So test strategy basically describes how the QA process and how the QA approach will be in that particular specific project. Okay, and apart from that, it also depends on what your stakeholders also interested in. For example, let's say you have presented in test strategy, but your stakeholders or to whom you are presenting this test strategy, or let's say your team itself is interested in the QA stack which you are going to use. Okay, so that also you have to take in account, as in that it's not always theoretical you can go with. You should always have a one POC handy, that okay, these are the tools and libraries which you are going to prioritize for this type of testing, and then you have maybe tested it by putting it in CI/CD pipeline which you have, because there are certain libraries which works in GitHub Actions and doesn't work in GitLab, or maybe your customized CI/CD pipeline. So you should be having also this one POC handy, that which tools and libraries you are going to use. Basically, what will be your QA tech stack planned for the test strategy. Okay, and what will be the suitable one. Next question is that which I just explained, QA tech stack, should it be included in test strategy? So, if your team is interested in covering that up as a part of test strategy, then ideally, yes. Because test strategy is exactly a reflection of what we are going to do, or what quality gates we are planning, and how we are going to do it. So, in how section, we can always mention that we have planned, let's say, for service testing or for basically API testing, we are planning to use a rest assured, and you have created a sample project and you have tested it in running it in CI/CD pipeline, and you have got the reports also. So it's always a good to have thing in test strategy. Third question is that test framework should be built before or after completion of deployment. Sorry, development. So we have seen the cases where, let's say, project is in inception phase, and that time QAs are not involved. And then after that, once the, let's say, deployment is completed or it's going on, or after 2 3 4 sprints, QA is getting involved, and then we have been asked to do a test framework. So we can always suggest that that we should be getting involved right from inception, or maybe from sprint, instead, if not sprint 0, then sprint 1, definitely. Okay, so it would be better we start testing or start creating our test framework as soon as we see that what components and what is the architecture uh, which they have started with. Now, this is the last question I have for today, which is infrastructure testing. Whether is it functional testing or cross functional testing? I wanted to know from you. Ashutosh, are we getting any replies?
Not yet. I think we are yet to. Can you do the question once again? Go to the question slide.
Yeah. So, infrastructure testing, whether it's functional testing or cross functional testing, just like cross
I think
functional.
it's the answer mix. Some people are saying functional, some people are saying cross functional. So it's a mixed response which is coming from people.
Okay. So, again, it depends on how you are going to use it. Because, um, because let's say as a QA, I have, so there is one of the rarest of use case which I have worked, which I was working from last 2 3 months, which is testing the deployment process. Deployment process, as in to test something related to blue green testing or zero downtimes testing. Let's say if any service is down in prod environment, then the replica service should come up, and which is like a mirror service, should come up and serve all the traffic. So this cannot be done as such via UI test or API test. Maybe after coming up, I can see that whether this particular service is serving the traffic or not. But I wanted to check that before coming, I mean before making the mirror service up, whether my test, whether it is able to serve the reflected traffic, or whether it's able to serve the traffic or not, basically. So this comes under functional testing. But let's say you have a deployment project and the developers are writing the unit test for it. It will again the functional testing, right? So yes, I think for the people who said that it's a functional testing, it is correct, because irrespective of tools and libraries we are using for infrastructure testing, at the end we are testing the integration, we are testing the functionality only. Okay. So yeah, that's it for now. Thank you everyone for joining this call on Saturday, and you
And
can reach me out on LinkedIn. Yeah.
I think Monica, we have a few questions. We can take one or two questions before we go to the next session.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a question from Sundar. He's asking, How do we interpret the actions you explained in test strategy in Scrum level or SAFe scaled agile enterprise process product owners?
Can you have you how do you interpret the actions you have explained in test strategy in Scrum level or scaled agile to as product owners? So, what I should say. So, I presented one of my test strategy as a product owner. So there my focus was not at the technical level for sure. There I haven't added a tech stack. So in that case, what I've done is that I have explained whatever business was interested in listening to. For example, let's say if I say that we are thinking of doing integration testing, or we are going to do API testing, okay, then the question will be from them is that why, let's say why you are doing performance testing also. It will going to get covered in integration level test or UI testing, why you are going to do it. So in order to explain that, I have to tell them from the business scenario that let's say I'm going let's say Flipkart is going for sale. I mean, the products are going for sale in that specific month, and at one point of time there will be 5,000 active users or 10,000 active users. In that case, whether our application will survive or not, in order to check this we have to do performance testing. So they are always uh, uh, interested from the business front, that this is the business scenario, this is how we are going to solve it with this kind of testing. Or let's say in case of security, um, so it's better to do a security or the vulnerability checks before then we leak one major client related details in the production, which is basically can be clearly visible in the logs. Okay, so we have to explain them the business scenario and the solution to it, rather than jumping into that, okay, we are going to use all these kind of testing.
Got it. Got it. Thank you, Monica. I think let's end this here because Kalpana is also here for the next session. So thank you, Monica, for doing this, and thank you for taking time out of your production release, which is happening live right now, and also the session which you have just missed for this. I hope people liked it. Budding speakers like Monica, they're always come up with newer knowledge, newer concepts, and I really liked how you took a use case first and then probably explained the implementation of different type of strategies. Uh, so thank you, Monica, for doing this, and I hope to see you soon in future events at the test drive. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashutosh. Again, I just wanted to cover as much, things which I have learned from while working in multiple projects, which also includes like working on different kind of use cases or how we are going to solve that problem. I would encourage you all to, not just stick into the traditional approach. Maybe if you see that, okay, this particular library or this particular approach is getting used, try searching the alternatives, and then make a decision that, okay, which you are going to use for what kind of problem. Okay, so yeah, that's it. Thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you.